It's funny how love sneaks up on you in the most inconvenient places, like a corporate boardroom where everyone's wearing fake smiles and knives tucked neatly behind their backs. The last thing I expected when I walked into that meeting was to lose control of my own heart. But then again, I hadn't met him yet. The first time I saw Ethan Carter, the infamous CEO of Carter Enterprises, I wanted to punch him. Not because he'd done anything to me, but because he had that look, the kind of look that said he owned the air everyone else breathed. Perfectly cut jawline, piercing steel-gray eyes, and the arrogance of a man who knew people bent rules for him. He didn't even notice me at first. But I noticed him. God, did I notice him? I was supposed to choose the company's next business partner. It was the project that could define my career, maybe even my future in the firm. Dozens of portfolios stacked high, every candidate polished, strategic, and safe. But when I looked across the table and saw Ethan watching men the way CEOs watch analysts, but the way a man watches someone who unexpectedly matters, something inside me shifted. And just like that, the rules of the game changed. I had moved to New York chasing ambition, not love. My life until then had been neat spreadsheets, coffee-fueled nights, and trying to prove to a world that didn't care that I belonged. My parents had called me naive for believing in dreams, but I thought if I worked hard enough, someday I'd silence the doubts. Love wasn't on the agenda. Love was messy. Love distracted. But Ethan Carter was the definition of distraction. He was ruthless in the market, respected in boardrooms, and terrifying to competitors. Yet, when he leaned in to shake my hand, his grip warm, his smile slightly crooked, there was something startlingly human in him. Vulnerable, almost. The irony? He wasn't supposed to be an option. He wasn't even on the official list of candidates. But when he invited me to talk business over dinner, I knew I was walking into a storm I couldn't resist. The restaurant was dimly lit, the kind of place where power deals were sealed with wine and whispered promises. Ethan didn't waste time with small talk. "You're different," he said, his voice low, almost challenging. "How so?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You don't flinch around me. Most people do." I smirked, sipping my drink. "Maybe I'm just not smart enough to be afraid." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine, cutting through the tension. For a moment, it wasn't CEO and analyst, it was just two men sharing something unspoken. A flicker of attraction. A dangerous pull. And God help me, I wanted more. The following weeks were chaos. Meetings, negotiations, endless nights spent reviewing contracts, yet my mind kept circling back to him. I told myself it was professional interest, that choosing Carter Enterprises made sense strategically. But late at night, when I replayed his words in my head, I knew I was lying. The truth? I could hear him. Not literally, of course, but in those moments of silence, when he looked at me a little too long, I swore I could hear his heart calling mine. Of course, nothing worth having comes without a cost. When the board learned that I was pushing for Carter Enterprises, questions rose. Accusations whispered. Did I really think I could risk everything for a man I barely knew? My boss warned me bluntly. If this goes wrong, it's your career on the line. And maybe it should have scared me. But every time Ethan's hand brushed mine under the table, every time his gaze softened when he thought no one was looking, I felt something stronger than fear. Maybe for the first time, I wasn't just making a choice for the company. I was making one for myself. But Ethan wasn't easy. He was guarded, layered like armor forged from years of expectations and betrayal. I caught glimpses of his scarce's strained phone call with his father, a silence too heavy when I asked about his past, the way he avoided eye contact when vulnerability slipped through. "You don't want to get close to me," he murmured once. Late at night after a meeting, his voice barely a whisper. "Too late," I answered, my hand finding his, and in that stolen touch, that fragile moment, I realized what terrified me most. I wasn't just falling for him. I was already his. The city outside kept spinning deals, deadlines, drama, but inside our stolen world, time felt different. We weren't supposed to be anything. Not colleagues, not partners, certainly not lovers. Yet every moment together carved out a truth neither of us could deny. And still a storm was coming. Because love in places like this, love between men in the shadows of power, was never simple. And when the truth came crashing down, when the board discovered more than just a business decision tied us together, we'd both have to choose. The company, or each other. And I had no idea which choice Ethan would make. Secrets in New York never stayed buried for long. And Minnie Orse was already slipping through the cracks. It started with whispers. Too many dinners with Ethan. Too many glances that lasted longer than they should. I told myself we were careful, professional. But the truth was, I didn't care if anyone noticed. Not when he was the only person who made me feel alive in a city that thrived on masks. One night, after another exhausting day of negotiations, Ethan drove me home. His car was quiet, the city lights blurring past as if they knew better than to intrude. My head leaned back against the leather seat, exhaustion pressing down, but then his hand brushed mine on the console. Just a touch, just skin against skin. But my pulse roared in my ears like thunder. "You should stay away from me," he said softly, his eyes never leaving the road. "And you should stop looking at me like that." I shot back before I could stop myself. His lips curved, not into a smile but something more dangerous. "Like what?" "Like you already know I'd follow you anywhere." The silence after that was suffocating. Neither of us spoke again until he pulled up outside my building. But as I stepped out of the car, his fingers caught my wrist, pulling me back for just one moment. Our eyes met, and for the first time the CEO mask was gone. He wasn't Ethan Carter, the untouchable mogul. He was just a man fighting the same war I was between desire and fear. "Good night," he whispered, his voice raw, but my heart screamed that it was anything but. The storm hit faster than either of us expected. The board called an emergency meeting. Rumors had spread off bias, of conflict of interest. Someone had dug too deep, connected the dots between Carter Enterprises' sudden rise to the top of my list and my increasingly frequent absences from the office. I walked into that boardroom with my chest tight, eyes scanning the table. My boss's expression was carved from stone. The other executives avoided my gaze. And at the head of the table sat Ethan, unreadable as ever. "Mr. Carter," one of the directors began, voice sharp. "Can you explain why your company has received such extraordinary consideration in this partnership?" Ethan's eyes flickered to me for the briefest second. Then calmly, coldly, he said, "Because Carter Enterprises earned it. Nothing more." But the heat behind his words wasn't for them. It was for me. A warning. A plea. Don't let them see. When the meeting adjourned, I could barely breathe. I stormed into the hallway, the polished floors blurring under my feet. Ethan followed, his footsteps steady, his voice low. "You can't crack now," he said. "They think I'm compromised." I hissed. "They think I chose you because of what?" He pressed, his eyes blazing. "Say it." I swallowed hard. "Because of us." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, with a suddenness that stole my breath, Ethan pulled me into an empty office, slamming the door behind us. His body was inches from mine, his hand braced against the wall. "There is no us," he whispered harshly, though his eyes betrayed him. "Then why can't you stop looking at me like that?" My voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. For a heartbeat, for one fragile second, I thought he might deny it, that he'd push me away for good. But then his lips crashed onto mine, fierce and unrelenting, and every lie we told ourselves shattered. The kiss wasn't soft. It was war. It was every suppressed feeling clawing its way out, every sleepless night, every heartbeat we'd tried to ignore. And when he finally tore away, his breath ragged, his hands still gripping my shoulders, his eyes burned with something I'd never seen in him before. Fear. Not of me, but of what loving me would cost him. For days after, everything blurred. Our meetings were sharper, our silences louder. Every brush of fingers under the table felt like fire. Every stolen glance felt like confession. But New York didn't forgive secrets, and neither did the corporate world. One evening, I found an envelope waiting at my desk. No name, no return address. Just a single photograph. Ethan and me, at the restaurant, his hand over mine. My smile too soft, his gaze too tender. The note inside read, "Choose wisely. Careers don't survive scandals. Hearts don't survive liars." My stomach dropped. Someone knew. Someone was waiting to destroy us. I rushed to Ethan's office, heart pounding, throwing the photograph onto his desk. "We're being watched." He stared at it, jaw tightening, then calmly folded it in half. "Let them watch." "You don't understand," I argued, panic rising. "This could ruin both of us." "I understand better than you think." He cut in, his voice steel. "I've spent my whole life being watched, judged, controlled. I won't let them take this from me. From us." For the first time, he didn't hide the word. And in that moment, I realized the storm wasn't coming. We were already in it. But storms break things. And when the fallout began, it came harder than either of us were ready for. The press got wind. Headlines screamed speculation. Competitors circled like vultures. My boss called me into his office and gave me a choice: distance myself from Ethaner hand in my resignation. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the skyline. My whole career, everything I'd fought for, dangled by a thread. And all because of him. But the truth was simple. If loving Ethan meant burning down everything I'd built, maybe it was worth it. Still, when my phone buzzed and I saw his name, my chest tightened. I answered, my voice shaking. "Tell me it's not over," he said. No greeting, no pretense. Just raw, desperate need. "It might have to be," I whispered. The silence that followed was the kind that could kill. But then, softly, brokenly, he said, "I can't lose you. Not now. Not when you're the only thing that feels real in my life." And God help me, that was the moment I knew. No matter what the world threw at us, I was his, and he was mine. Scandals don't just happen in New York, they explode. By the following week, my name was everywhere it didn't belong. Gossip blogs, trade papers, even the business section of the Times. Words like conflict of interest and secret relationship screamed from headlines, each one cutting deeper than the last. The board summoned me again. Only this time, the air in the conference room was poisoned. "Do you deny the allegations?" my boss asked, his tone colder than the polished mahogany table between us. I wanted to. God, I wanted to stand there and insist it was all a lie. But the truth weighed heavy on my tongue, and when I glanced at Ethan across the room, his expression gave me nothing. No warmth, no comfort, just the mask of a CEO protecting his empire. "Yes," I finally forced out. "I deny it." The lie tasted like blood. When the meeting ended, I expected Ethan to pull me aside, to tell me it was just for show. But he didn't. He walked past me as if I were no one, and that somehow hurt worse than the headlines. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the photo that had started it all. My hands shook as I traced the outline of his face, the softness in his eyes the camera had captured. Proof that underneath the armor, Ethan wanted me as much as I wanted him. But wanting wasn't enough anymore. My phone buzzed. His name lit the screen. For a moment, I couldn't answer. I didn't know which version of him I'd hear: the CEO, cold and untouchable, or the man who once whispered that I was the only real thing in his life. "Meet me," he said when I finally picked up. His voice was low, urgent. Now. I should have said no. I should have protected what little remained of my career. But I couldn't. When I arrived at his penthouse, the storm outside mirrored the one inside me. He opened the door, tie loosened, eyes wild. "You lied," I snapped before he could speak. "You sat there today and acted like there's nothing between us. What did you expect me to do?" He shot back, voice rough. "Admit it? Hand them the bullet and let them pull the trigger on both of us?" "I expected you to fight for me," I whispered. "Not just your damn company." His face crumpled, just for a second, before he turned away. He poured a drink, his hands trembling as he set the glass down untouched. "You don't understand what's at stake," he said. "If Carter Enterprises collapses, it's not just me. Hundreds of employees, their families. And what about me?" My voice cracked. "What about us?" He closed his eyes, pain written in every line of his body. That's the problem. There can't be an us. Not here. Not now. The words landed like bullets. I turned to leave, my chest hollow. But before I reached the door, his hand caught mine. "Don't walk away," he whispered, voice breaking. "Even if I can't say it out loud. You're the only thing that matters." Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But words and shadows weren't enough anymore. I pulled my hand free and left. Days blurred into weeks. I buried myself in work, avoiding his calls, ignoring the headlines that still buzzed like hornets around us. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't silence the echo of his voice, the memory of his touch. One night, I found myself wandering into the bar we'd once gone to after a late meeting. It was nearly empty, the bartender cleaning glasses with half an eye on the game playing overhead. I ordered a drink I didn't even want, staring at the amber liquid as if it held answers. "Rough night?" a voice said beside me. I didn't look up. You could say that. But then I did look, and my stomach dropped. Ethan. He looked tired. Not the usual sharp, invincible CEO, but worn down, shadows under his eyes. His suit rumpled as if he hadn't slept in days. "You're following me now?" I asked bitterly. "Maybe," he admitted, sliding onto the stool beside me. "Or maybe I just knew you'd come here. You always run to places that remind you of the good." I wanted to shove him away. I wanted to scream. But instead, I whispered, "Why are you here, Ethan?" He took a deep breath, his hand trembling slightly as he set it flat on the bar. "Because I can't do this anymore. Pretending, lying, watching you walk away when all I want is to hold on to you." My throat tightened. "Then why did you push me away?" "Because I thought I was protecting you," he said, voice breaking. "I thought if I carried the weight alone, you'd be safe. But I was wrong. I'm losing everything anyway, and if I lose you too, then none of it matters." His eyes were glassy, desperate, and for the first time, the man who ruled empires looked small. Human. Mine. Before I could think, I reached out and covered his hand with mine. He flinched, then gripped it like a lifeline. "You idiot," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "Don't you get it? I was never afraid of losing my career. I was afraid of losing you." The kiss that followed wasn't war this time. It was surrender. Soft, aching, a promise in the ruins of everything else. And for the first time, I let myself believe we could survive this. Together. But the world wasn't finished testing us. The next morning, a headline hit harder than all the rest. Carter Enterprises faces federal investigation. Insider deals and corruption allegations. The storm hadn't just found us. It had swallowed us whole. The investigation was merciless. News outlets feasted on Carter Enterprises like vultures circling a dying animal. Every decision Ethan had ever made was questioned, dissected, painted in the ugliest colors. For weeks, the headlines screamed corruption, betrayal, insider trading. His rivals thrived in the chaos, clawing at his empire while the world waited for him to crumble. And through it all, I stayed. First, Ethan tried to push me away again. He told me to save myself, to keep my distance before I drowned with him. But I refused. If the world wanted to watch us burn, then I would burn beside him. We spent nights in his office, surrounded by towers of files, hunting for proof of his innocence. Some nights, exhaustion would break him, his hands shaking, his voice cracking as he muttered that maybe they were right, maybe he wasn't worth saving. Those were the nights I'd take his face in my hands and whisper the words he couldn't say himself. "You are not alone. You are mine, and I am yours." And slowly, painfully, the cracks began to show in the lies that had been spun around him. Evidence surfaced. A rival company orchestrating the scandal. A trail of forged documents and false testimony. The truth fought its way to light, piece by piece, like dawn after a sleepless night. But victories in courtrooms didn't heal the wounds in his heart. One evening, after yet another brutal day, we found ourselves walking in the rain. The city was quieter then, the storm washing the noise away. Ethan stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, water dripping from his hair, his chest rising and falling unevenly. "I don't know who I am without all of it," he confessed, his voice raw. "The power, the company, the reputation. If I lose it, what's left of me?" I stepped closer, pressing my forehead against his, letting the rain soak through me too. "You're Ethan, the man who kisses me like he's drowning. The man who fights even when he's terrified. The man my voice broke. The man I love." The word hung between us, fragile and unstoppable. His eyes widened, glassy in the lamplight. And then, with a shuddering breath, he whispered back, "I love you too." The kiss that followed was different from all the others. Not desperate, not stolen, just true. The months that followed weren't easy. Ethan stepped down as CEO, handing the reins to someone the board trusted to stabilize the company. The media spun it as defeat, but I knew the truth. It was freedom. For the first time, he wasn't carrying the weight of an empire alone. We moved slower after that. Days of quiet walks through Central Park, nights spent cooking together in his penthouse kitchen, or a tempting toy nearly burned the pasta more than once. We learned the small things about each other. The way he hummed when reading contracts, the way I snored lightly after too much wine. And with each detail, each ordinary moment, the cracks inside us healed. There were still looks sometimes, the whispers of strangers who recognized him, who remembered the scandal. But we didn't hide anymore. His hand found mine in public, firm and unflinching. And every time, I felt his heart calling my name louder than any headline ever could. One spring morning, months after the storm had passed, Ethan took me to a park I'd never been to. The cherry blossoms were in bloom, scattering petals across the grass like confetti. He led me to a bench beneath the largest tree, his expression softer than I'd ever seen. "This is where my parents used to bring me when I was a kid," he said quietly. "It was the only place I ever felt safe." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you for bringing me here." He looked at me for a long time then, his eyes searching mine as if to make sure I was real. And then, without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My breath caught. "I don't want empires," he said, voice trembling but steady. "I don't want headlines or power or any of the things I used to think mattered. I just want this. You." He opened the box, revealing a simple silver band. No diamonds, no flash, just sincerity. "Will you stay with me? Not just through storms, but through everything." Tears blurred my vision as I nodded, my voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and in that moment the world disappeared. There was no scandal, no judgment, no fear. Just two men, sitting beneath falling blossoms, choosing love. Looking back now, I realized the irony. The project that was supposed to define my career ended up defining my heart. I was asked to choose a business partner. Instead, I chose a man. And in choosing him, I chose myself too. Because sometimes, love doesn't whisper. Sometimes it calls your name so loudly you can't ignore it. And if you're brave enough to listen, it changes everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.